Bev here. Unfortunately, I will not be live with you for this event, as if we don't do enough live events, right? But this is a replay by popular demand. This is an international Q&A where we're talking about how you can do FDN around the world. Just wanted you to know that, again, I'm not live for this, so if you ask questions in the chat, I don't know how many we're going to be able to help with. I think one or two people might be staffed for this one. But what we do have is a lot of questions in the video itself, so you might just find that your stuff gets answered regardless. And if somehow it doesn't, no worries at all. Just use this email below, fdninfo@afdnp.com, and we'd be happy to get your questions answered. We know that it's especially important when someone is starting FDN internationally to make sure that, hey, can I do this in my country? Do I have the labs here? What does this look like? Are there other practitioners in my country doing this? The answer to all of those is probably you're 100% good to go, but we totally understand you wanting to do your due diligence. So we hope you enjoyed this session, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys tomorrow morning for another live session.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. And we are excited to be here on this Saturday, June the 22nd, to talk all about how you can be a health coach or an FDN practitioner, as we like to call ourselves, in and around the US and international. So I'm excited to have some people joining us today. And while we're waiting for you, I'm just going to move the chat over here. I'd love for people to tell us where they're joining us from. I am here in sunny and cloudy Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. So I'm representing Canada. And Raven, where are you joining us from?
I'm joining us from San Diego, but I used to practice in the UK.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, so we're just letting everybody in here. We'll give everybody another few minutes before we get started. And let's see if we can see how many people we have here. I'm going to move this over here. Got a few of us jumping in. Welcome, everybody. So yeah, as you're joining us, please let us know where you're joining us from and what questions you're hoping that we will cover, because this is going to be an interactive Q&A. We do have some questions that were pre-written in, but this is going to be an interactive Q&A where we answer all your questions about practicing outside of the United States. I know a lot of people have questions about that. You know, how do you access lab testing? What are the logistics of working with clients overseas? What about supplements? So we're going to make sure that we try to answer all of those questions for you. So love for you guys to just pop in the chat where you're joining us from, and we will get started in just a moment. And I'm going to bring up, because we do have some announcements. This is a really busy weekend. We're running quite a few replays this weekend for those of you who may have missed them in the earlier weeks. So I just want to share those with you, and you'll be able to catch them all on our YouTube channel. So I'll grab that link and I will put it in the chat in just a few minutes on how you can watch the replays on our YouTube channel. But we have one coming up today that is not long after this call at 3:30 Pacific time. And that's a replay of the call that I did with Evan, where we talked all about the medical director program and we answered all your questions about testing. So that's a really great one. And then we have a couple of replays tomorrow. So tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Pacific time, we have Sarah Ball. That was a really great talk where she talked about how she grew her practice to over 6 figures. So that's a really great one. We have trainee roundtable happening tomorrow as well at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And this is a good one for those of you who want to see, you know, what is the experience like as a student? So these are students who are actually going through the course right now, and they come on and they talk with Evan and they share their experience in the course. So that's a really fun one. And then we also have the replay of the metabolic wellness profile on tomorrow as well at 1 o'clock Pacific time. And that's one of our 5 foundational tests. So we've been playing some of those recordings so you can see what it looks like for us to look at the test, how we look at the markers and what they mean, and how we look at things differently from a case study perspective. So that's a really amazing one. And then the last one we have tomorrow, there's a lot of replays at 3:30 Pacific time. We have Martha Krejci, another FDN practitioner who is coming on to talk about thought leadership and how to build a brand. So those are really, really great ones. If you missed them earlier in the week, we are replaying them for you all this weekend, and you'll be able to watch those on our YouTube channel, and I will grab that link for you in just a few moments. So with that, I am going to put us on camera. So just give me a second so that you can see myself and you can see Raywin. And we're going to jump in and we're going to answer all of your questions. So the first question that we have is, how are FDNs able to order labs internationally? So I can definitely answer that one. And then if anybody else wants to jump in and answer that, that would be amazing. But we were the first to establish what we call a medical director program very early on, when Reed Davis, our founder, started teaching this course back in 2008. And the reason that we did that is he knew that in order for us to do this amazing work, we needed access to lab testing as non-licensed practitioners. And so he developed the medical director program, which is the ability for non-licensed practitioners who have gone through the FDN certification course to be able to access testing for themselves and for their clients. And as we grew that program, we established a lot of amazing lab relationships, including partnerships with labs internationally. So we have a partnership with some labs in Australia and New Zealand. We have partnerships with labs in Europe that are able to ship internationally. And what I always tell people is we can get a kit into almost any country in the world. There's very few countries where we cannot get the samples out, but we have shipped kits to almost every single country in the world, amazingly, over the years. And so that's how we are able to access that testing, is being a part of the FDN community, graduating from the course, and then having access to the medical director program. So I'll just pause there for a second. Does anybody else want to jump in and add to that about the ability to access testing internationally? Because I know a lot of people question that.
Yeah, I would like to just add that, while I was living in the UK, the Nordic Labs was the one that I used, and you could send, I had clients who were in New Zealand and Australia, and you were able to send via FedEx or UPS or whatever it was, whatever courier service, you could send lab kits there, and there would be a pickup. They would actually collect the samples for you too and send it back. So it's totally doable. There's not really a lot of barriers to working with people from anywhere in the world, and from you working anywhere in the world as well.
Yes, yes. And that's the beauty of having partnerships, is that we've really established them, and we're trying to pick partnerships with labs that make it really convenient for you and your clients, so that there's not a lot of hassle to access the testing. Which is great. And we have a similar experience with our partner in Australia. They have a distributor in Asia. So this question does come up sometimes, but we're actually also able to support those in Asia through that distributor, and they make the process pretty straightforward, which is great. So that is an awesome question. And just as a reminder, we want this to be interactive. So for those of you who are joining us and you have questions, please pop them either in the Q&A or in the chat, and we will make sure to answer them. But we're going to answer some of the most common questions that come in beforehand. So the next question is, what is the MDP, which is Medical Director Program? And I just covered that because that's how we have the ability to access testing for our clients. Now, one of the new things that we have brought into the FDN community is an exciting new partnership that we have with Avexia Labs, or sorry, Avexia Diagnostics. And the reason that I wanted to talk about that, even though we're talking to international practitioners here, is because you can do FDN from anywhere. So you may be a practitioner in Europe and you get a client in the US and you want a streamlined way to be able to access testing for them. This is where Avexia Diagnostics can come in. So Avexia services both the US and Canada, and regardless of where you live in the world, as a practitioner who's gone through the FDN program, you can open an account with them to service your clients in the US and in Canada. And we are excited to partner with them because they've made lab ordering definitely more affordable. They are giving you the ability to do practitioner pricing with your clients, and the ability to potentially order most of your tests from one place. So it's a very streamlined experience. So we're very excited about that partnership, which is great. So the next question that comes up is which labs can be ordered internationally? So great question. And the only testing that we really is difficult for us, regardless of where you live, is anything that requires a blood draw. So here in Canada, and I'm sure it's similar in many other countries, we have socialized healthcare. So in order for us to go to a lab to have our blood drawn, we need a requisition from a doctor that is within the province that we are living in. And I believe that's similar in many other countries as well. And so the testing that we do at FDN, for the most part, can be done at home. So we do saliva testing, urine testing, dried urine, dry bloods. That's where you're pricking your finger and it's going on paper. So dry blood spot testing. And we also do stool testing and some hair testing. So for the most part, those samples can all be collected at home, and those test kits would be available almost anywhere in the world. The only exception, as I mentioned before, is anything that requires a blood draw. And the only one that we teach as a foundational test is the food sensitivity test. The preferred one that we like is the LEAP MRT. That one does require a blood draw, but we have a great alternative for our international practitioners, which is a dry blood spot test. That's the only one I've ever used with my clients in the 10 years I've been doing FDN, and it's a great test. It's very, very helpful. So one is not better than the other. So that's a great question. So a question here is, are there restrictions on ordering supplements in the UK versus the US? So Raymond, that might be a good question for you.
Yeah, no, there are no restrictions. Amrita Nutrition that's where I used to use that, and I still have clients who are in the UK, and I still refer them to Amrita Nutrition. And when you become an FDN practitioner, you can sign up for a practitioner account with Amrita, and then you get discounts. I think you get like a 35% discount with Amrita, and you can pass on a 15% or a 10% or a 5% discount to your clients once you share a code with them, and you can set the discount with Amrita in the back end. So they basically have the exact same supplements that we use in the US as well. And it's been pretty seamless because I've never really had to struggle to find anything. So it's, just like you've got a full script here, Amrita's like the version of that in the UK.
Great. Yeah, and I've used them as well, and they've got every brand you can think of on Amrita. I think one of the questions, and I'm not sure what the answer is in the UK, but I know for Canada is one of the things we teach in the course is we do talk about hormones, and not that we are doing, hormone therapy, but we do talk about how to use low dose hormones as a support. And that is one thing we cannot do in Canada. So we're not able to bring hormones into the country, and they're not sold over the counter here in Canada. But one thing that I've wanted to share with everybody is that I've been doing this for 10 years, and I still get results with my clients without using hormones. So that is not a barrier to be able to practice FDN. Is it similar in the UK, Raywin, on the hormone front, or is it a little easier?
I'll be honest, I worked with a functional medicine doctor, so we were able to recommend hormones. So I don't know as an FDN because I had him covering me, so we were able to prescribe hormones. So I can't say for certain, but I will find out.
Sure, sure. And is Antoinette on? Because I would love for her to jump in and kind of share her experience in Australia. Antoinette is an amazing FDN practitioner who's also one of our course mentors, who is in Australia, and she has a wealth of knowledge. So I would love if she's on, she can jump in, and if not, we can jump her in when she joins. I don't see it. Okay, no problem. Awesome. So the other question is, does the course cover testing internationally? Yes, we do. So we do, we are an international course. We have practitioners all over the world. So we absolutely want to make sure that we're showing you how you can practice in your country. And we've actually worked really hard in the past few years to, if you're in the UK, Raywin was talking about Amrita Nutrition, like we show you protocols using what's available to you in your country. We also have protocol information about, if you're Australia, New Zealand, we have a separate one for protocols in Canada. So we definitely talk about how you can practice in your country. And as I mentioned, Antoinette on our team, she is a mentor from Australia, which is great because she really understands the differences there and she can support you as a student if you're in Australia and New Zealand, which is amazing. And then we did have at one time we had a mentor in the UK as well, which was helpful, and we're always looking for those. So, and we do have practitioners in Canada that can support you if you're in Canada. So that's a great question. All right, this is a great question. So, do you have any advice for international FDNs? This is a pretty broad question. Um, so I'll start for Canada. So again, I took the course about 10 years ago. I graduated in 2014, and back then it was much harder to source supplements. We did not have full script. Everything that I was doing, it was coming from the US. I had to pay custom fees. I had to do the exchange in the US dollar. Like it was not convenient. But what I realized is that the principles that you are taught in the FDN course can be used regardless of where you live. So early on, I had to get creative and try to find alternatives. The beauty now is that there's so much more information nowadays. It's much easier to find alternatives regardless of where you live. The other thing that I want to share with you is that one of the labs that we partner with is Fluids IQ. They're based in Montreal, Canada, which is amazing. So for us Canadians, when we're working with our clients, it saves them a little bit on the exchange rate from US to the Canadian dollar. But what I would say to you is, and this is the other thing that comes up a lot for Canadians, because I get the question, well, is somebody going to pay for your services because all of our healthcare is like covered by the government? And it's a great question. And the answer is yes, they will. It might take a little bit more education on your part because people aren't used to paying for healthcare. And so they may not understand the concept of like, well, why do I have to pay for this? But what I can tell you is every person that has come to me, they've come to me because they've been through so many other practitioners already. They've been through that hamster wheel or that revolving door of doctor after doctor after doctor who says, nope, nothing wrong with you. Oh, wait 6 months to see a specialist. Nope, there's nothing wrong with you. Or they go to a naturopath and they go somewhere else and they're not getting results. And so by the time they come to you, a lot of times they're willing to spend whatever money they have to spend to get better. And so you definitely can do this in Canada. And it's just being confident in what you can offer and the results that you can get them. And making sure you're charging what you're worth. Like if you do that, they will come. So that's my little kind of rah-rah speech for Canadians. But Rewan, do you have advice for people in the UK? When you were working in the UK, did you have any challenges or things that you like to share with some international practitioners?
Well, the great news about working in the UK, I was there right before we left Brexit. So right before that happened, I was able to practice across Europe very easily because, there were no issues with like sending supplements or kits or any of that stuff. There still aren't. It's just that the people that we would order those things from, they've had to create separate European entities for us to order from. So initially, Amrita was amrita.co.uk for everyone, and same thing for Nordic Labs. Nordic Labs was already based in Copenhagen, so they were already servicing the UK in terms of getting labs out to anyone. So I would work with people who were in Spain, people who were in Italy. I had one client during the whole of COVID. She spent like a year and a half in Italy. She was Italian, but was domiciled initially in the UK, and then when realized that lockdowns were happening, she hightailed it out and went to Italy for like a year and a half, and she was living in Sicily, and I was able to get labs to her there. I was able to get supplements to her there. The trick with that though is like the what do you call it? Like you've got to make sure that is it duty? I think it's like the taxes and stuff. You got to work that into your pricing because there are usually some kind of like tiny little surprises that come up at the end when you're getting them to the client. They're like, oh, I didn't realize I'd have to pay duty on that. So just figure out what those things are. But usually on your end, it's very minimal, like your involvement in that sort of thing. It's sort of like, okay, they need these supplements, you give them the links, they order it, and then they can communicate directly with the supplier. So you don't necessarily have to be too involved in that kind of thing. And same thing with the labs. Like there's very little, like you put the order in on their behalf, and then the lab company is the one who's going to be dealing with the courier and all that other stuff. So you don't really have to get too involved. In terms of like blood work, I thought that was a good one. Interesting as well, because the UK and most of Europe is socialized medicine. So getting blood work done with your traditional healthcare practitioner, let's say you have a doctor or something, that can sometimes be a tiny bit of a challenge. However, there are alternatives for people to go privately and go and get those types of things done. There are even online services where you can order blood work, and you can order it on their behalf, or they can order it themselves as clients. You just tell them what you want on the requisition form and they can order it themselves. I'm trying to remember, there was one called Thriva in the UK, and you could specialize what you want, and it comes with its own app and it breaks down, blood, your blood tests, etc. And there was another one I can't remember the name of, but like I used to use it for women's wellness. So like if the GP did not want to give out, like they're like, oh, I'm not going to run a full thyroid panel for you, because that's one of the things that, we look at different things to doctors, right? So we're not going to be like, I'm only going to look at your TSH. We want to look at, your T3, your reverse T3, T4, your thyroid antibodies when we say we want to look at your full thyroid. And sometimes doctors wouldn't be willing to do that for clients on the NHS or, the socialized healthcare. So I would just say, look, it's really simple. Click of a button. It might cost you, I don't know, £100, £150 to just get the full panel. It gets sent to your house. They usually did it via a finger. You could do it via a finger prick as well, or you could pay a mobile phlebotomist. You could get your client to just get someone to come by for £35 to come and do a blood draw for them. And they send it off for you immediately and they don't have to do anything else. So there's so many ways around this that we just have to think a little bit creatively and differently to what we're accustomed to. But once you get the hang of it, like it's so simple. It's just like, oh, Google mobile phlebotomist and put your postcode in and then it will find it. And then you share that with your client. You're like, this will give you a list of people who can actually come to your house and do a blood draw for you, if we ever needed to do that. But the traditional FDN labs don't generally require a blood draw. The only one, like Brandy said, was the mediator release test, which is our food sensitivity test. And not everyone needs to do that. Like we have other versions that we can use in the UK or in Europe via a finger prick test as well.
Yeah, yeah. And the good news is for Canadians is that I saw some rumblings behind the scenes that we might start to be able to get the opportunity to order our own blood work, some of the direct to consumer stuff. So that stuff is coming, and I do have alternatives. You mentioned thyroid. That's a difficult one. I generally have my clients go to their GP. And again, we don't look at blood work specifically in the course, but they're going to go and get it from their GP anyways. So, we can look at it from a functional perspective. It gives them a little bit of a different take. So that's another option as well. Now, you had mentioned you had a client in Spain. Cheryl said she had joined late and she wondered if anybody was practicing in Costa Rica and Spain. So Spain, yes. Costa Rica, I'm not sure. Are you familiar with any FDNs in Costa Rica? I mean, I know we have some in South America. So
I did live in Mexico and I'm from Trinidad. And the trick with some of these countries is that you can get the labs in very easily. It's getting them out that might be tricky because there will be extra charges because they're non-exempt human specimens. So it's just being mindful of that. Like you can get them out with the courier, you just might have to pay a little bit extra. So that's probably the only challenge that would arise. It will be a cost. But it shouldn't be too prohibitive. It might be like $50, 50 US dollars to send it back. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's for the most part the issue that most people have. So like you said, Ray, when we can get the kits almost anywhere, it's the logistics of getting it out of the country. And when we have prospects come to us, one of the things I suggest them is go talk to a local courier that routinely ships things out of the country and ask them questions and say, is there any restrictions on sending these exempt human specimens? And it's, saliva, dry urine, dry blood, stool out of the country. They'll tell you. They'll know. It's really hard for us to stay on top of the legislation in every single country. But that's a really good resource for you because they can tell you, no, we don't do it, but this company does it. And then you get to know what's going to work for you where you live. So that's a great question.
We had an FDN who lived in, I think it was Abu Dhabi, and she and I went through our training together. And she was able to use the medical, like she would got familiar with the labs in the country, because she was an expat as well. So I think that also helped. But she got familiar with them and their schedule for shipping things out, like human specimens. So she was able to ship out her kits with them as well. She just asked, and they were like, "Sure, no problem," and there were no questions asked. So there are lots of ways for us to do these things that are legal and safe, and that if you build relationships with, like Brandy was saying, like with your courier companies, or if there's like a medical facility or a lab that you can build a relationship with, they might be willing to help you out in that way.
Yeah. That's a great idea. I've been doing that a lot as well, is like build relationships with other alternative practitioners as well, because you might learn things that you didn't know. So it's a great way to find ways around it.
I
That's
think
awesome.
that applies for all kinds of aspects of this type of business as well. Like, just be good. You're not going to work in isolation, even if it might feel like you are. The best thing that you can do for yourself is to actually connect with other practitioners. So whether you are in Spain or in the UK, or, or Costa Rica or Mexico, or the South American countries, connect with the people who've been doing it before you, like who are actually there, find out what they've been doing, figure out if there's some kind of partnership or way for you to band together and do things as a collective. And then that way you're not just the odd man standing out.
Yes. Great question. So this is an interesting question. Are there countries where there's a shortage of FDNs? It's a good place to focus marketing, like Australia or Dubai? That's an interesting question. I mean, I would say we probably have a shortage of FDNs everywhere. I mean, it would be amazing to have a lot of FDNs everywhere. We're definitely more concentrated in the US. I mean, I would love to see more Canadians. I think this work is so great. I don't know. We might have one practitioner in Manitoba. I'm like one of two maybe in Saskatchewan. Maybe there's three of us now, and we're pretty big land masses, and so there's only a few of us to go around. We're getting better in Australia. We don't. Australia, I think, is also a great place. We have a couple of practitioners in New Zealand. I think we recently had a student enroll from Dubai, but I mean, absolutely. We need FDNs everywhere and sharing this message, because what we do is our job is not to take the place of a doctor. It has its time and place. If you have an emergency and you need some emergency treatment, like go to a doctor. That's not what we are here for. We are the people that are there to kind of close that gap between I don't feel great and I can't figure out what's going on with me and I have a diagnosed disease. That's where FDN practitioners shine, is we can really help you to identify what's going on with you before you get to that point that it's like diagnosable. We can see trends beforehand. We call it metabolic chaos, the dysfunction in the different body systems happening beforehand. And so the value of that is it's amazing. And I think there's more and more doctors, and we're seeing more MDs, like a lot of functional medicine practitioners really, understand what we do, but we're seeing more MDs and traditional doctors seeing the value in FDN practitioners. So I think the more that you can get yourself out there and share what you do, and in some of those countries where there's maybe only one or two FDNs, you may have to be one of those people that is willing to get out there and talk about it and be brave, and then doctors are gonna be like, hey, what's an FDN practitioner? What are these people doing? I need to learn more. Like the more people you talk to, and this was a question that came up about networking, the more you share what we do, people are interested. I've shared it with my dentist. I talk to massage therapists. I talk to my dental hygienists. I've talked to like moms that were in the group where my daughter has dance. Like there's so many different ways that you can share what we do, and people are interested. They might not get it right away, but they start asking more questions, and they become interested. Like I wanted to figure out what's colon hydrotherapy like, and I was talking to the colon hydrotherapist, and she was so interested in what we did. And you'd be surprised, like the synergies you can have with different people. Maybe it's a personal trainer, maybe it's a yoga studio. There's lots of different ways that you can network with different people who they probably have great connections. Um, and I'm talking a lot, but this story was great. I was in a health food store, and the woman who owns the health food store, I was just kind of eavesdropping. She was having a conversation with the person in front of me as she was checking them out. And they were talking about all of the alternative practitioners that she's built a network with because they were coming into her store. And
Mhm.
she, anybody could say, hey, I'm having this problem. And she could refer them to like 5 different people because she knew somebody who did this and somebody who did that or somebody who did that. So don't discount those places as well. And like farmers markets, there's a lot of ways you can network.
Can I add something to that too, Brandy?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I was just thinking about like my time, I was in England for 22 years and in central London. And one of the best ways, connecting with the chiropractors, so your allied health professionals are great places for you to start networking. And there was also an online Facebook group for we had a Biohackers London Facebook group, and they used to meet up like once a month. I never made it to a single meeting, but just that group, being part of it and connecting with people who are into health and who are into optimization and longevity, they would have a similar mindset to that of an FDN, even if they didn't really understand what FDN was initially. So connecting with groups like that, like your biohackers, your running club, your cycling clubs, anything like people who are into red light therapy, even like holistic beauty places, those are some cool places for you to connect with. They're not necessarily people doing the exact same thing as you, but they have a similar mindset, and this is an opportunity for you to build and cross-pollinate, if you like, your referral network. So those are some cool ways. I mean, I started off in a chiropractor's office, and I worked also, so I had like two offices, this was before going online. I had two brick and mortar spaces. I worked in a psychiatrist's office and a chiropractor's office. They were both like a 10-minute walk away from each other and about a 15-minute walk away from my apartment. So it was really easy for me to do those, and they would cross refer because I did things that the psychiatrist didn't do because I was using nutrition interventions for anxiety and burnout and mental health. And he liked to prescribe, but he knew that if there were people who were showing up with IBS or anything related to the gut, he would send them my way. And then similarly, the chiropractor would do, like, if someone was complaining about pain or about constipation or not sleeping, he'd be like, hey, this lady can actually help you because she does this whole bunch of tests. She could figure out what's going on with you and help you, work your way, live your way out of it, because you've obviously lived your way into it. So, don't be afraid to partner up with other professionals. Don't be afraid of them, because they could be great referral partners for you.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Awesome. Let's see here. Networking is important in all businesses. My background includes medical social worker and business development for healthcare agency. Network is a must for growth. That's awesome. You have a great background, Cheryl. That's awesome. Do things ship slower internationally? That's a great question. Yes and no. I mean, yes, because it's not going to, some things you can't ship overnight, but for a lot of the testing that we do, so let me just take the dry blood spot food sensitivity test that I was talking about that I really like. So that one it's only good at room temperature for a certain period of time. So when you're ordering a test like that, even a saliva test, like you can only have it at room temperature for a certain period of time before the sample becomes non-viable. So the labs will give you instructions and support you to get those kits and samples shipped back to them in a good amount of time. So it might not be overnight, but let's say you're ordering something. I mean, we have Nordic Labs now, so it makes it better. But when we didn't have Nordic Labs, we would order a stool test. Somebody in the Europe would take it, and then we would, the lab makes sure that you have the ability to get it back to them within 7 days, and it might take 4 days. So instead of overnight, it might take a couple of extra days. So it's not a big difference in shipping times. Like the labs will tell you what's needed, and oftentimes they'll support you with the shipping aspect of things to get the sample back to them while the sample is still viable. So that's a great question. All right, awesome. So I see a couple of new faces here. Finally here. Thank you, Sarah, for IG. Barbara from Vancouver Island. Welcome, Barbara, fellow Canadian. So we've been covering some questions about testing and supplements and recommendations. So what are your questions? Why are you joining this? And what is your interest in, being a practitioner internationally? What are all the burning questions that you have that we can try to help answer for you? Because that's why we wanted to have this. We know that people are showing up, they're coming to these events, which is amazing. And we're seeing questions like, well, I'm in Canada, can I do this? Or I'm in this country, can I do this? So we'd love to have your questions. So definitely pop those in the chat or the Q&A. And while we're waiting for some of those questions, let's see. Nordic Lab is great. Basically.
I was going to answer Cheryl's question. She wants to travel in the future. That's why I want to know if I can work anywhere. So Cheryl, during COVID, I was in the UK, but then I moved to Mexico. And yes, I was able to work from anywhere. And I had clients who were in the UK, Australia, and in the US while I was in Mexico. So you can totally travel while you're an FDN, while you run your business. I remember enrolling people into my program on a Sunday afternoon on the beach and thinking like, whoa, I've made it. I'm in a bikini and I am helping people. It's awesome. So you can totally do it while when you become an FDN.
That's great. Yeah, we have a lot of FDNs. They love to travel, and that's why they love being a practitioner, because you can do this online. So as long as you have a good internet connection, you can do this from anywhere. We have people who travel in RVs. There was a practitioner that was traveling in an RV for a full year, and they were still running their practice. So you can absolutely do that, which is great.
Yeah, it's total freedom. You have geographical freedom, time freedom. You can set your schedule, work when you want, how you want, your pricing freedom, all of that stuff. It's great.
Absolutely. So that's a good question that people do ask, and I can answer specifically how I do it for Canadians. But the question is, how do I charge? So because I have not practitioners, I have clients everywhere. I don't just have clients in Canada. I actually charge in US funds. It's kind of one of those things that I decided on, but you can choose however you want to do it. The reason that I decided to charge in US funds is that it was easier for me to calculate how much to charge, because a lot of what I'm including in my package, like stool testing and things like that, came from the US. So trying to do the exchange rate was difficult. So that's what I do, but you can do whatever you want to do. And I was charging in US funds regardless of if I had somebody in Australia. I actually had someone in Russia that I worked with a couple of years ago before COVID. And I just kept it one currency and made things easy. I mean, I used PayPal. I was an early days PayPal person. PayPal made it easy regardless of the currency. So you can choose how to do it. This is a great question. And Raywin, did you want to jump in on that before we answer the next
Yeah,
question?
I was thinking about how you structure your packages depending on where you are. Like if you're in the UK and Europe, you might structure it in euros rather than in pounds. I was based in the UK, so I kept everything in pounds. Nordic Labs, I believe, also sets everything up in pounds. If you're, depending on where you're based, it will have it set in your currency. So you can accept currency based on that. And if you set up like a Stripe or a Square account, you can decide what currency you want to accept payments in as well. So Stripe and Square are two payment processors that you can have it built into your website, and then you can just accept payments exactly like that, like really easily. So that would be my 2 cents about accepting payments from anywhere in the world. There's some other good questions in here about like the credibility of FDN.
I love this. I love this
I can
question.
go for this one.
So I'll read the question for people who might not see it. It says, is FDN recognized in other countries? Can I market in other countries, or is it more US based, but international folks will still give it credibility as it's US based? So I love this question about credibility, because I think there's often a question of like, is my credential recognized? So does that mean I'm good enough to practice? And the reality is, unless you have a license, a lot of these credentials that people have, they're not going to be recognized by big bodies. Recognition and credibility is more based on is it going to get covered by insurance? That's how I look at it. In
Mhm.
all the years that I've been doing FDN, nobody has ever asked me for my credentials,
Mhm.
and they've never questioned them. Never. Uh,
Same.
like I've never had that happen. Now
7 years and never.
so, but I can understand where, the question is like, you may be asking credibility from the perspective of, well, is it illegal for me to do this? And so what's different about FDN is that we are not diagnosing or treating. So while we're talking a lot about lab work here, the purpose of the lab work for FDN practitioners is not for us to make a diagnosis and prescribe something. The purpose of the lab work for us is to gain clues about the person sitting in front of me. So the analogy that I always like to give is, if you're a crime scene detective and you go to a crime scene, do you want one piece of evidence or do you want all the evidence? You want all the evidence. And that's what the lab testing can do for us. It gives us more information about the person sitting in front of us, not to say, oh, you have Hashimoto's. It's, hey, look at the dysfunction going on in the hormonal system. Look at the dysfunction that's going on in the gut. Look at the dysfunction that's going on with blood sugar. All of these things are clues that tells us about the person sitting in front of us. And then what we're doing is we are giving them lifestyle recommendations to make improvements in those areas. So there's nothing illegal about us telling people, hey, you probably shouldn't go to bed at 2 o'clock every single morning. You probably shouldn't drink 10 cups of coffee a day. Not moving at all probably isn't good for you. Like, we are giving them, I mean, a lot of it is common sense, but people actually need to have support and coaching on that. And that's a lot of what we do is we're doing lifestyle coaching, and then we are weaving in supplementation in here. But again, it's not from a prescriptive perspective. It's from these things may support you. And it's also not meant to be long term. So I get that question a lot too, is, okay, is it just you're going to give people a boatload of supplements and then they're on it forever? No, because if that's what's happening, we haven't done our job. We're educating our clients on what's going on with them. We're empowering them to be their own best advocates. And then we're teaching them how to listen to the clues that their body's telling them. So I have clients that once they're done with me, they know when something is off. So they might come to me like 6 months later and go, hey, we should retest. I've been noticing my sleep has been off and I've been doing all these things. And I think there's something that's like not working. And we'll test, and oh, their cortisol is really high. Well, let's find out why. So we're not giving them something for their cortisol. We're kind of uncovering these clues and kind of redirecting them. We're coaching them. We're teaching them. And so it's not, I don't want to say the word illegal because that's not the right word, but that's how we do things. So you can do that regardless of where you live in the world. Hopefully that helps. Again, I like to go on some of these tangents sometimes, and just I'll reiterate to say I have never been asked in 10 years of doing this work anything about my credentials. It's more about what the results that I can get for my clients and what I'm teaching them. And if you come at them from that perspective of you want to help them, you want to educate them, and you want to support them, you're going to help your clients get results if you come in with that attitude every time. So that's a great question. Okay, Barbara, my understanding is cost of labs is rolled into packages, but what if more is needed than the standard 6? So, I first of all, you're not going to want to run more than that with your client because you want to start with the foundations first. And if you run like 10 lab tests, which like you're not going to do a protocol for 10 different lab tests all at the same time. A person cannot handle that. So the reason that we do the 5 foundational labs that we do is because these are the foundations that we need to start with. That if we start with those foundational areas, and those are we love acronyms at FDN, and the acronym we use is HIDDEN. So we're looking at the hormonal system, the immune system, digestion, detoxification, energy production, and nervous system. So the foundational tests that we use is looking at all of those areas. Once we get the clues about what dysfunction is going on in those areas, then we start to work on the lifestyle protocols to bring those back into balance or to help the body bring itself back into balance. Now, if after you've been doing those foundations for a period of at least 90 days, then and the person says, hey, I'm about halfway there, but I'm not quite there, then you might do a little bit more testing, but you're not going to do a whole bunch of testing at first. That's not a great steward of your client's money. And we want to think about that when we're working with our clients, and also realize that, a client isn't gonna want to go on a 1 year protocol. Like if you bring them in and you do 10 tests, let's say, and then you say to them, it's going to take us a year to figure this out, they're going to run. Like you have to start slowly with them and slowly work your way up. So we always start with the foundations. It's a great question. So, do you want to add anything to that, Raylan?
Um, I'm trying to think. I love the foundational labs because they really do give you a picture of what we're looking for with the hidden, right? So it gives you insight into the person in front of you. And I think if you try all of that and 4 months or 5 months goes by, or we say 3 months, but realistically it's about 16 weeks, right? If 16 weeks goes by and there are no improvements, then you can be encouraged to look deeper. But very often, I would say 9.9 out of 10 times, the foundational labs move the needle. Once you get the insight from the foundational labs, the needle for your client's health is going to move, and sometimes very, very quickly. And I can give you a very short example of a client that she'd had breast cancer. She was in her 60s. She had been a victim of sexual abuse. She'd been working as a nurse, but she had to quit her job because it became so hard for her to walk because she was out of breath all the time. She had anxiety. A bunch of things were going on with her. She invested working with me. And while we were waiting on her labs to come in, she said, what can I do while I wait for the labs? Because it's going to be about 2 to 3 weeks. I said, well, how about you read this book, The Metabolic Typing Diet? And she got the book instantly, like she downloaded it on Kindle, Amazon, or whatever. And she started reading it. And 7 days later, she said, I have lost 7 pounds in 7 days. This is after I had tried being a vegan, tried being a vegetarian, tried going low fat, low carb, all kinds of things. She just changed a few things while waiting for the labs to come in, which we were going to talk about anyway, because we were going to talk about metabolic typing once her lab results had come in. But I said, if you want to be proactive, just do this one step. And she said, I have been trying for years, yo-yo dieting. She did Arbonne. She did all these random diets for years to lose 20 pounds. And in the first week, she just shed 7 pounds just from rearranging the way that she'd been eating and adding a little bit more protein because she was getting a lot of plant-based protein and it wasn't really helping her. So what is the metabolic typing diet? There is a test that once you start working with an FDN practitioner, you will be able to get that. And that's one of the things that we include as part of our foundational. So, diet is foundational. I think that's why it's the first thing in dress, it's diet. If you can get diet right, then so many other things will naturally fall into place. So the other thing that shifted for her very quickly within the first 14 days was that she stopped being out of breath. So she was able to start exercising, and she hadn't and when I say exercising, this is a lady in her 60s. She did not want to run marathons. She just wanted to be able to walk without being out of breath. And she was able to start walking with her husband. And they both collectively, in the 3 months that we worked together, he had lost 30 pounds and she had lost 20 pounds in 3 months. And he was able to go for a knee surgery that he'd been putting off because he was so overweight they couldn't do it, just from us changing up the way that she was eating. And because she was cooking for him, it actually worked on him too. So these are the cool wins that you can expect just very quickly without needing 15 lab tests. Starting small with just diet and customizing it to the person based off of the metabolic typing diet is a great place. And the other thing that we do is food sensitivity. So, and I had told her that I said, if you want, you can remove your gluten and your dairy and your sugar, along with, some of the items in the metabolic typing diet. So that really does work. And you don't need to necessarily do tons and tons of things. And I'm not saying that just because her symptoms went away, that meant that everything was okay. But this was someone who was being incapacitated in her daily life. She couldn't do things that everybody else around her was able to do. And when she first came to me, she said, I feel like I'm just sitting around waiting to die. And I'm not being dramatic. That's literally what she said. She's like, I feel completely hopeless. Everyone else around me is living their lives and I have no energy. I can barely breathe. It's hard to walk. It's hard to move. I'm anxious about everything. And, you know, in a couple of months, this person got her life back, her body back, her, you know, joie de vivre. She was very, very happy. And you don't need 15 labs to be able to do that. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. It's a great story. And I mean, I have lots of similar stories like that. I have a client who came to me for infertility. And, you know, as a side thing, she had Hashimoto's. I'm not really worried about the diagnosis. And before we had even started anything, we were waiting for tests. Um, she had brought me her blood work and her antibodies were off the charts. We just had her remove gluten, and just removing gluten alone cut her antibodies in half. So there's a lot of power in lifestyle changes, and the testing is helpful, but you know, it's these little things that you can do for your clients that make a big difference. So this is a great question. This question always comes up in one way or another. So when you say you can work around the globe, work around the world. What if I'm in Europe and my client is in a red state in the US? I love this question. So I think there's a lot of confusion about red, green, and yellow states in the US. So what that means is they're in a state that is likely more legislative around diet. It's not about, you know, giving lifestyle advice. It's more about that in that particular state, one, can your services be covered by insurance? Well, our services aren't covered by insurance because we're not licensed. And then second, there are some red states that are restrictive on what you can and can't do with diet. Well, we don't prescribe diets. We're not writing diet plans for people. We're not creating food plans for people. So if you're working with somebody in a red state, what you do is you just, you know, similar to what Raywin just said, like let's say you're working with somebody in a red state, you don't want to be prescriptive about a diet saying this is the diet you have to do to get better. You would say something like, and we talk about this in the course, you would say something like, hey, go read this book. Just like Raywin said, that person when read the book, they did the test that was in the book, they changed their diet according to their results, and they got results. They were doing it on their own. Another way you could do that is, hey, I've had clients in the past who have benefited from, you know, doing an autoimmune type diet for a couple of months. Here's some resources that you can look at and you might want to try it. That's a way for you to get around the dietary restrictions. It's most likely going to be diets, like what you can prescribe. And we don't do that anyways, but you want to be careful and just, you know, give them really great resources. Like, remember, we're educating them. We're not telling them exactly what to do. And the other important thing to remember is as FDNs, we tell you do not work with anybody until or order tests or do anything like that until they have signed a terms of service agreement. And we do have a sample of that we give to all of our practitioners when they graduate. And that terms of service agreement clearly states within there that we are not doctors. We are not licensed. We are not diagnosing or treating anything specifically. We are providing education and recommendations, and that it's incumbent on them to go to their primary care physician if they make any changes. They sign that first, and then they work with you. Whether they do that or not, that's out of your hands. Now, that's not to say we don't, you know, we want to have them do that and trick them and, you know, then we're prescribing. Like we don't do that. We are educating them and we are giving them recommendations. And if they're coming to you, it's because they're choosing to do self-care. That's what we call it. It's an opt-in model of self-care. They are opting in to make changes for themselves and they're asking you to help them. So hopefully that clarifies that for that question. We answered the question on metabolic typing. What food sensitivity tests are available? So I'm guessing you might be asking about internationally. So dry finger or dry blood finger stick testing is a really great alternative for international because it is stable at room temperature for longer. It's not a blood draw where it has to get back to the lab very quickly within 24 hours, so it can be shipped overseas. There's two labs that I really like. One of them is Mosaic. So Mosaic, which used to be Great Plains, they have a dry blood spot test. I've used it several times. It's a great test. And then another one that we do like here as well is the KBMO FIT test. That is also a dry blood spot test. And keep in mind, food sensitivity test is not, it's not set in stone. It's not perfect, but it is a very good tool because it does give you valuable information. And the one thing I can tell you is that it helps with compliance. So if you have a client that is saying, well, I eat this food and sometimes I don't feel great, but I still eat it. If they see it in red and like it's like high red on that piece of paper and they later go, ooh, okay, I'm going to take that out of my diet. It's a very, very helpful compliance tool when your clients can actually see that there's foods that they're eating that's creating inflammation and stress on their body. So that's a great test. What kind of additional costs are you looking at for international shipping? Are all labs sent back to one place? It's really tough. It really depends on where you live and it can really vary. I would say I'm going to just give you an estimate, anywhere from $30 to $60 US. It really does depend. I mean, sometimes it's less than that. There are some labs, like for instance, here in Canada, when we ordered the GI map test, Diagnostic Solutions, which is the lab that offers that test, they will ship it to Canada for free. And they include a prepaid return shipping label from FedEx. So there isn't, you pay a little bit more for the test in Canada because they've included that in the price of shipping it to you and then that prepaid label. For the dry blood spot test I was just talking about, I think the last time I sent one to the UK, the shipping both ways, I think it was $45. And that's to ship it there and give them the label that they need to ship it back. So it really does depend on where you are in the world. All right, Farhad, should I consider opening an account with Avexia or continue working with Nordic Labs or order direct from labs? Do you think they will add more screenings for international FDNs? So that's a great question. I would open an account with Avexia if you plan on having clients that are in the US or Canada, because it can help you streamline lab ordering for your clients. Avexia only services the US and Canada. If you're only working with clients that are not in the US and Canada, then Nordic is a great option because they can service almost anywhere. They ship kits all over the place. And we're always looking at ways for us to make like all the testing more accessible. I mean, if you look at Nordic Labs, they have a lot of testing on their menu and they are partnered with a lot of labs like Doctors Data. I think they're partnered with Genova. So a lot of the big names that you see in the US, Nordic Labs has partnerships with, and they're always looking to add more. I know we've talked to a couple in Australia as well that are looking to add labs. So for instance, we work with NutriPath and they have a lot of those tests as well. Genova, Great Plains, Doctors Data, like a lot of those labs are covered by NutriPath in Australia. And for the person who just asked about Japan and South Korea, so that would be NutriPath. They have an Asian distributor. And so we would partner with them. And so in your instance, you would want to work with, or we would help you connect with the distributor, the Asia distributor for NutriPath, so you can access testing through them. What are the 5 foundational lab alternatives in the UK? They are actually almost exactly the same. So while it's not Fluids IQ, we found testing through Nordic Labs that's pretty much the exact same marker. So there is a salivary hormone panel through Nordic Labs that has all the same markers as the one in the US and Canada. Same with the food sensitivity test. We also have mucosal barrier assessment. So we've found alternatives that are very similar to the 5 foundational labs, regardless of where you live in the world. So that's great. And it says, I have clients in both the US and international. Nordic is great, but I like Avexia's platform. I mean, I would use Avexia for US clients.
Yeah. And what's cool about Avexia is that it integrates with certain patient portals. So like I use Biocanic and it integrates with that, so I can order my labs directly from my Biocanic patient portal for my clients. So there are a couple of, Avexia is pretty awesome, actually.
Yep. Great question. All right, let me go through here and see. I think we've answered a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Um, So let's see. If you guys have any more questions, well, I'll give you a couple more minutes just to pop them in there. And I will remind you of some of the replays that we have coming up. So if you had events this week that you couldn't attend, we will have some replays. And actually, I will see if somebody on the team could pop the link for our YouTube channel in here, because that's where you're going to be able to watch those replays is on YouTube. So I would encourage you to go to our YouTube channel and subscribe. And if you turn the notification bell on, I feel like I'm like a YouTuber right now, turn the notification bell on, you'll get notifications when we go live, and then you can catch those trainings. So thank you, Brenda, for popping that in there. So if you just go and subscribe there, you can watch the recording. So we have one a little bit later today where I go even more in depth on the medical director program, and Evan and I answer a lot of questions there. And then tomorrow we've got a couple of replays on from FDN practitioners who have built six-figure practices. So I would encourage you to watch some of those ones. We have our trainee roundtable replay. So this is where you actually get to hear from students who are currently going through the course. And then Monday, we've got some new speakers coming on. So in the morning, we've got Molly Cahill, who's going to be talking about how to use Instagram to grow your business. We get a lot of questions about that, so that's going to be a great one. And then later in the morning on Monday, and you'll get emails if you're enrolled in Summer Open House and you're here today, you'll get emails with these dates and times. But we have our very own Michelle Scarlett. She's also an FDN practitioner, and she's also going to talk about how she grew her practice to six figures using Instagram to promote herself. So these are some great talks that we have coming up, and I really encourage you to join them if you can. And if not, try to catch, we're not replaying everything, but try to catch some of the replays that we post on our YouTube channel. So that's great.
We had one last question just come in there.
Yeah.
She said, how did your international clients find you? Was it random happy accident via traditional marketing channels, or do you specifically target certain countries? That's a really good question. It depends. So while I was in Mexico, I still had a UK practice going, because I'm trying to think, how did I market? I guess just through Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, and yeah, just using those channels. So your tradition, I guess those are traditional marketing channels nowadays. So I didn't specifically target any countries, but you can, I guess, if you wanted to put like a search into Facebook, if you were going to do like Facebook ads or something like that, you could put in a demographic of where you want people to be, how old you want them to be, really niche down. That's also an option to do. I mean, I'm really clear in my marketing that I only want to work with women 35 to 55 who are in corporate or feeling burnt out from being in corporate, because I want to help them get over their burnout or feeling anxious or stressed or suffering with gut problems. So being clear about who it is that you want to serve is going to be super important regardless of what platform you use.
Great. And I mean, I'm not a very good marketer, so a lot of mine is word of mouth. And I went the route that we actually we teach in the course, and actually what made most of the very first FDNs the most successful, and it was talking to people locally. So it, like I had mentioned before, it's talking to people who are asking me questions about, hey, I'm struggling with my health and this and that. And you might not get them right away, but you're talking to those people and sharing it with my dentist. I was at my biological dentist, and we were just chatting, and I shared it with him, and he was like, oh, that's so amazing. Or chatting with your massage therapist, and then they refer people to you. So at this point, I have a lot of word of mouth referrals, and that's one thing I like to share with people is once you start getting into it and you start working with clients and they see the results that they're getting, they will tell other people. I am not actively marketing right now, but I'm still getting 1 to 2 people booking with me a week just because they heard about me from someone else. So to have faith in the process and just talk about it wherever you are. You don't necessarily have to go online, because I know that sometimes that can be really intimidating for people. So it's going to health fairs, going to farmers markets, going to health food stores, going to different places like that. We have lecture packages, done for you lecture packages that you can leverage as a practitioner. So you could go and give a free talk somewhere, go offer maybe at a library or maybe a studio or a personal training like a gym or something, and they'll have you in and come and do a talk and just give a free talk. And we have different topics you can choose from. And that's also a way for people to learn about you. And then you can reach out to them. And are you going to get every single person that attends signed up with you? No, but they're learning more about you. And once they heard you talk, they may say, huh, this isn't for me, but my mom, she's not feeling great. Maybe I should have her reach out to Raywin because she might be able to help me or whatever it is. So there's lots of different ways that you can do it. Hopefully that helped answer some questions. Awesome. Well, I hope this was helpful. Oh, we do have one more question. What about lab options in Brazil? So yeah, we did talk about that a little bit earlier, but what we were chatting about is that for the most part, we can get testing into almost any country. The difficulty could be is that depending on the country you live in, there may be restrictions on getting the samples out of the country. So I do believe I think we actually have a trainee in Brazil right now. So we're able to get kits there. What I would encourage you to do is check with your local couriers, so the ones that ship things out of the country, and just ask them and say, are you aware of any restrictions of shipping exempt human specimens out of the country? And exempt is hair, saliva, stool, dry blood, dry urine. And they're going to be able to tell you what it is. And I think, Ray, when you were sharing that a lot of them will do it, you just might have to pay extra to ship it out of the country. And that's an unfortunate thing. Being international outside of the US, oftentimes there is going to be extra shipping charges, but it's worth it because you're going to be able to get information for your clients. So hopefully that helps. Well, fantastic, Raywin. I appreciate you for jumping on with us today. I know we were getting questions from people who lived internationally so thanks for sharing your experience and sharing your knowledge. I hope this was helpful for everybody. And again, I just want to remind you, go ahead and make sure that you are keeping an eye on our summer open house calendar and attending the upcoming talks next week. And go and follow us on YouTube so that you can catch some of the replays that we have decided to reshare. Those will be happening later today and into tomorrow. So go there and like and subscribe so you can get notifications. And we will see everybody on the next one, which is on Monday. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Brandy.
Bye.